10, the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Did he chair the Cabinet on 18 February 2013 when Cabinet noted the initial $4 million payment to a Saudi investor, and did he ask why Cabinet approval was not being sought?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, this is question 11, of course, Mr Speaker, but... Sorry, you just said question 10, but I'm just confirming it's question 11.
Question
yes.
10. And it's the Honourable David Parker asking the Prime Minister.
Okay. Yes, I did chair Cabinet and answer the second part of the question. No, Cabinet was asked to note the payment. It was within MFAT's appropriation and did not require Cabinet approval.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
When he was chairing that Cabinet meeting, was he aware that Minister McCulley had told the Saudi investor and MFAT officials that he would not want any financial contributions to be treated as compensation, as this would involve a plethora of lawyers and bureaucrats?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I've been aware the whole way through that Mr McCulley has never viewed this as compensation because it's not.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. That wasn't my question.
Order. Yes, it was your question, and it's been answered.
No, sir.
Order. Does the member have a further supplementary question?
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Why did the contract for the $4 million payment make no reference to the settlement of the long-running dispute when Cabinet noted this as part of the payment's purpose?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You really have to refer that to the Minister of Foreign Affairs because the Foreign Ministry put it together, but everyone is aware and reading the papers just where the responsibility started, and it was with the Labor Party, and yes, National cleaned it up.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
Did Minister McCulley tell him and his Cabinet that the Auditor-General had made a written complaint to MFAT about MFAT misrepresenting its advice about the Saudi sheep deal?
The Right Honourable
Mr.
Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
I can't recall discussions about the Auditor-General, but I think But Mr Speaker, I think it's been quite clear that there was some early dialogue. Ultimately, actually, the officials are very happy with the way the process went.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
What can his government show for this dodgy deal, other than a sullied international reputation, a failed farm in the desert where the lambs died in a sandstorm, according to his own minister, the waste of over $11 million of taxpayers' hard-earned dollars, and still no free trade agreement?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I know the truth is inconvenient, but it's worth actually having a look at the papers because it was the Labor Party that imposed the ban. It was the Labor Party that said they would reverse the ban, and it was the Labor Party that dispatched the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade at the time, Phil Goff, who told the Saudi minister they would restart, and it was then Labor government that actually did not tell the Saudis till they'd publicly made the decision. It's very inconvenient, but this all started with the Labor Party. That's what I call dodgy dealings. It's the Labor Party's actions.
Supplementary. Order. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
In light of the dump of 900 pages of documents last week that failed to prove a single word of the claims made by the Prime Minister about the Labor Party, and the fact that it is the National Government that twice continued the ban on live sheep exports, isn't it time that he finally cut through all that crap and was just straight with New Zealand? What is the real reason why he paid off Al Khalaf?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, Angry Andrew worked the first time it was in Parliament. Now it just looks like bad language and the inability to actually front up and be honest. Phil Goff went to Saudi Arabia and misled them. The rest is history.
Question number 11, Melissa Lee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education and asks, what recent announcements has she made that supports the learning of Asian